Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Geometer's Compass. I'm Geoff from Dublin in Ireland, and this is
Scott Onstott in Victoria, Canada, and we're joined today by
Karen Alexander in Portsmouth, England.
Hello, Karen. Hello, Karen. A serious guest of honor, because Karen is not just one of these champion geometers that we've been wanting to have on our podcast for a long time, but she's also a dear friend of both Scott and I, and a real champion and ambassador of the crop circle phenomenon, you know. So just by way of introduction, I just want to very briefly shout out, Karen, that you have created this beautiful website called temporarytemples.co.uk. And I don't know a better reservoir on the internet that has collated so beautifully the rich history of the phenomenon of crop circles in all its majesty, not just photos, but video, your writings, your geometry, your drawings, your artistry. It's really, really like the go-to source for all things crop circles, you know? And, in addition to that, for our listeners, just to say, crop circles have been a huge part of my life personally. And actually, strangely, it has kind of been the linking mechanism for Scott and I to connect. So when I first saw Secrets in Plain Sight from Scott all those years ago, it must have been about 2011, maybe I watched it. I was just so enjoying Scott running these geometries all over the planet. He was talking about like ancient architecture, even mentioning ancient aliens and Alexander Sitchin and these people. And
Zechariah Sitchin, I think.
Oh, Zechariah Sitchin. Thanks, Scott.
And I just mentioned him there in the documentary, and I got a lot of flack for it because he is a controversial guy. But I take him as a fiction, and if you just take it that way, it's really enjoyable.
Yeah, well, that's a good attitude, a good mode of approach. But I was just saying, if you're willing to do that, I found it funny that you were happy to omit crop circles. So I felt called to action to say, oh my God, if this guy's going to put together this 4-hour epic tome of geometry, and didn't mention crop circles, I need to do this guy a favor and tell him about the most wonderful, beautiful, sublime, pristine geometry that exists in this wonderful formation. So my first email to Scott was actually, hey, dude, there's this thing called crop circles, check out the geometry. And then Scott got back with a lovely reply saying, hey, you know what, Geoff, I'm actually really into the geometry of crop circles, and I've actually been drawing them for many, many years as a personal meditation, but I just wasn't certain whether I wanted to include them in the documentary series because I didn't want to open that can of worms,
which still kind of, I want to talk about a little bit about that with you, Karen. Does that come up for you, like in a sociological context of members of society? Do you recognize this kind of resistance to the idea of crop circles, or a kind of rejection of it? Is that something that you encounter?
Yes, definitely. So I mean, some people are really great and they're really open to it. And so it's kind of like the dreaded question, really, isn't it? It's like when you're sat on a plane going somewhere and somebody's sitting next to you, and then they sort of introduce themselves and they say, oh, hi, I'm Kay and I'm from so-and-so and I do this for a living. And then they sort of say, oh, and what do you do? And then I sort of, then it's, oh God, how do I even begin to answer that? So sometimes I just chicken out, but I kind of also test the water a little bit with people and see, do I think they might be willing to go there? And if not, we'll move on in another direction. But yeah, it's hard for people because it's a subject that carries a lot of freight with it. And also, a lot of people just don't want to go into those realms of having to think outside the box, and that's okay. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think you either are there and you're willing to do it, or you're not, and I really don't mind either way, actually. Yeah.
Karen, I suppose just for our listeners, a good starting point might be to ask you just, the short version of how did you get into this to begin with? Like, what was the first calling? How did you happen to pass by one years ago? When was it? How was it? What was your first touch point with the experience?
Actually, it was 1990, and the first crop circles I saw were in a British newspaper. I think there was a centre spread or something in one of the tabloid newspapers in the UK. And I was just sort of struck dumb by them. It was just sort of one of those moments where your heart stops and, you know, you realize that you're at this pivotal moment and everything suddenly has changed. And I think because I recognized something about them, but I didn't know what it was. So here was something that I'd never seen before, but at the same time felt really familiar somehow. I often use the phrase, you know, it's like a million words on the end of your tongue that your mouth just cannot form. And it was exactly like that. It was sort of, you know, hey, this is something I'd never seen before, but there's something incredibly familiar about that, but I'm not really sure what that is. But I did know almost from the off that I had to find out more. I had to get involved and you know, find out as much as I could about what was going on. And then from there, I was still really quite young at the time, so maybe about 21 years old, something like that. And I just started to connect with other people. And at that time, we were very fortunate because people were networked a lot better than they are these days in this. We do all our networking online now, but in those days, it was all done in person, but there were sort of groups. So I started to sort of connect with other people. And then the following year, maybe the year after that, 1992, the summer of 1992, I had 4 crop circles all appear within a mile of my house. And, you know, and it was just like, somebody left their calling card. So, you know, it was kind of one of those sort of moments where you realized, yep, I'm on a path here. Wherever this goes, I'm on it for the ride. You know, and on for the most part, it's been great. You know, I've learned so many things through being involved in this subject. There, of course, there's the other side of it. You know, it is a controversial subject. It does evoke some very strong feelings in you know, with people. But on the whole, it's been a very positive experience. And I view the whole phenomenon as something that's had a very positive impact on my life.
Can I just, for the benefit of our listeners, Karen, call out, you know, the elephant in the room, you know, which is like this question, which is inevitable, where you can't approach crop circles without asking the question, who makes them? Okay. And it's a very important question. It's one I honor, and there's many people spending a lot of time researching that, you know. But you know, for what it's worth, it's not really the most important aspect of the thing for me personally, you know, and never really has been, to tell you the truth, because the geometry is so sublime and so awesome. When you start drawing it and you start making mandalas out of it and you start going deep into communication with the geometry, where who the authors are of these becomes a secondary thing for me, you know. So I just want to, and there's a whole kind of like dichotomy happening where there was these hoaxers, they were called Doug and Dave, you know, they kind of like come from the man-made camp, and then there's the kind of the more mysterious unknown camp, and there's fundamentalists at both end of that spectrum, basically, you know. And I kind of look at that as an interesting mirror for the kind of the state of our modern psyche, if you like, and also our kind of addictive need for certainty one way or the other, you know. And to be honest, and I know I mean, we feel similar-ish, I don't want to speak for you, but you know, broadly speaking, it's a mystery, you know, it's a mystery to me. I'm, and it's one of the things I love most about it, you know. So it's deeply rich, it's deeply shrouded in anomalous occurrences and wonderful accounts of supernatural interactions, you know. And so I think what very, very many people stumble upon is they see it, they go, oh my God, I don't know what pigeonhole to put this in. Oh, they're all man-made. Great, that's fine. Go back to sleep, America, you know, and that kind of gives everyone an easy out in a way, you know. But if you stay with it and you really actually like go, hang on a minute, like maybe what if they weren't man-made, for example, you know. By the way, I'm not getting into that. I'm just calling it out to say, for the purposes of our podcast, we're just going to graciously leave that particular topic on the side, you know, because I know we've been through this so many times before. It's just not our core area of interest, actually. You know, there are so many more exciting parts of the phenomenon that float our boat more. Let's just talk about that, basically. But I didn't want to not mention it, you know, because it would have felt weird then for the listeners, you know.
I just want to throw in the idea that let's assume for a second that they're all man-made, okay? But what blows my mind is that if that's the case, why aren't they celebrated as an art project? Like, and just like, wow, this is a new art year. Check out what's happening in the fields. But for some reason, it's an excuse to ignore it all and to say it's all a hoax, so therefore it's not worth our attention. And I find that kind of amazing and interesting on a kind of psychological
level. You're right, Scott. You're right. I mean, you know, wasn't it your friend Michael Glickman, Karen, said it beautifully, that he said there's two miracles going on here. You know, one is that these incredible, sublime, perfected, high order of geometries appear year after year in our fields and are gifted to us free with the most exquisite, and it really is the most exquisite high level geometry you could imagine. That's the first miracle. And then the second miracle is that the world continues to completely ignore it. You know, just what you're saying, Scott, you know, it's exactly that point. It's like, even if it was just like this art, like how come people aren't interested in it? That is, as you say, very relevant as well, you know. But anyway,
it's about ourselves, I think. Wouldn't you say, Karen, that crop circles are like a doorway to like do inner work and not only on yourself, but also to understand others?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And you know, they in that they have that really close connection to sacred geometry itself. So, you know, it's exactly the same sort of principles that are at work. You know, you know, in classic sacred geometry, you might choose something to look at, whether it's Metatron's cube or whatever it is, and you go away and you work on that and you'll draw it and you'll look for all the fantastic mysteries within that. And the crop circles are exactly the same thing. You're just working with, you know, perhaps a more contemporary kind of geometry. So yeah, I mean, the process is really very, very similar.
And can I ask you, Karen, a little bit about your process, you know, because, well, there's two art forms that I really admire that you know, share with the world over and over again. And one is your writing, actually. I just want to honor your writing. Karen makes these wonderful yearbooks. They collate this, you know, the sort of the formations of every season. You've done it every year, haven't you, going back? It must be 2 decades, more maybe.
Yeah, 1999 was the first one. Yeah.
Wow, 1990. Okay, so these temporary temple yearbooks are really, really special. For the photos alone are magnificent. But Karen, you really have a special gift for writing, and your articulation about the nuances of what is available in the subject, you know, it's very, very rich, you know. So could I ask you about that way of interacting with the phenomenon? Do you enjoy writing about them? Do you find it meditative almost? Because it does read almost like a meditation when I'm reading them.
Yeah, it is. It's obviously a very important and big part of what I do with it, because I think, you know, that if you're going on your journey with your design, crop circle or otherwise, and as you're doing that, as you're drawing it, you're contemplating it, you're drawing inferences, it also evokes things within you as well. So but then what do you do with that? Well, yeah, that's great for my personal journey, but then I just, you know, think, well, wouldn't it be great if other people were taking these journeys on for themselves? So part of why I write about them in the way I do is to kind of say, hey, look, here's what's available. You know, you know, if you kind of spend the time giving your attention to these designs and working with them, there is a whole world within them to sort of discover. And so, you know, writing about those discoveries and how they, you know, affect you is very important to me. And actually part of that process also comes from my background working in counseling, in psychotherapy. So it's that idea of attending someone else and giving them your full attention and to listen and to notice, and then to somehow feed that back in a way that enables other people or that person to be able to see things that perhaps they couldn't see before. So again, the crossover is there. So, you know, and to me, the relationship, the fundamental relationship between geometrical shapes and consciousness is a big part of this for me, and I know it is for you as well. So but that's my way of getting at it. So I use those kinds of skills when I'm writing about it to sort of say, this is how this design made me feel. This is what it pulled out of me. This is what I've learned about me and or the world by doing that. And so, yeah, and it's done in the hope that other people, that will resonate with other people, and that it might encourage them to sort of try it for themselves, because obviously my perspective is just my perspective. But when you start, you know, when other people are then offering their perspectives into that mix, suddenly, you know, the whole, as I say, the whole world opens up, and you, you know, you get that opportunity to work on all those different levels just by giving your attention to one thing, which is amazing.
Yeah, well, your writing is awesome, Karen. Please keep doing it, you know, because I can't recommend it more highly, you know. And then the other art form, which I, you know, and we are kind of like, you know, like friends in arms with this one, but the drawing of the geometry of the formations, it's a very special hobby. I mean, it's more than a hobby, let's be honest. It's a very special, deep meditation, actually. When you choose a formation, calls you, or you're drawn towards a formation, you decide to unwrap the geometry in it. You then somehow geometry has this wonderful capacity to sort of, to not just capture all of your consciousness, but to hold it graciously as well in a sustained way. So you really get the benefit of this one-pointed focus when you're drawing geometry. I mean, I know I'm speaking to the converted because we've spoken about this, you know, but don't you think like there's something particularly potent about sacred geometry in general, but specifically crop circle geometry for that, you know? Or would you like, I would love if I could invite you to talk a little about your drawing of the geometry, how that works, and then of course the way you then decorate them, and you've got this beautiful artistry as well, you know, which is magic. So please.
Well, I was very, very fortunate, because when I was younger and first coming into this subject, I met my great friend, Michael Glickman, who had just, I mean, he was such a major influence on me, not just in this subject, but kind of in life as well. He was a real great character. He was a real raconteur. He could really tell a good story. I mean, he was just, the way he looked at the world was just fabulous. And I was, you know, very fortunate to work with him for many years. So, and Michael had a background in architecture. So one of the things that he did was to draw the crop circles, you know, and he would spend hours doing it, you know, just kind of working, you know, and at that time when he was a lot younger, he would draw by hand. And he would just spend hours at the drawing board, and then he'd get so far and he'd rip it all up and say, no, it's no good, and I've got to do it all again. So, you know, I was really fortunate to kind of work, you know, be able to see some of that work in progress. And I didn't really start drawing the crop circles maybe till about 2011, when I really thought, right, I've really now got to start and learn how to do this for myself. And I, you know, as I say, I was lucky to have him as a mentor. And drawing by hand is important to me personally. I think it was Keith Critchlow said that geometry is best drawn with the human hand attached to the human heart. And that really speaks to me. Although I have to say, I really admire people who can draw using computers, and I'm very envious of them because they get it done so much more quickly than me. I feel like a real Luddite sometimes, you know, there's a new crop circle and then somebody will have their geometrical analysis done within hours, whereas for me it might take weeks. So I really do, I admire that. But for me, there is something very meditative about drawing by hand. It becomes extremely experiential. It becomes an extension of oneself. And also the other thing I really learned from Michael was how to be a noticer. And I remember he once told me off because I introduced him at one of our crop circle conferences, and I called him a master geometer, and he was really cross about that, and he sort of said, I'm not a master geometer. He said, what I am is a noticer of things. And I just thought that was so great, because I think that is a key skill in sacred geometry, is to be able to look at whatever it is that you're looking at, and to be able to sit there and notice things, and to sort of say, okay, well, I noticed that and I noticed that. And then you start to draw those things out very slowly, sort of like unraveling a piece of string or whatever. And so being able to notice those things is really important. And of course, the longer you're involved in it, the more things that you notice. So, I'm always on the lookout for sequences of numbers or hidden geometries, because that's one thing that often happens in crop circles. They kind of have this exoteric geometry, which is the bit that you see straight away in the field, whether it's the pentagrams or the triangles or whatever it is that's going on. And then very often they have this esoteric geometry, which I guess, Scott, is what you were really good at when you did Secrets in Plain Sight, which was to take buildings and places and then to look for the hidden geometries, the esoteric geometries of them. And so that's kind of, what I learned from Michael as well, was that idea that crop circles have these hidden relationships in them. So it's not just about recreating the crop circle on paper. It's then looking at, okay, so is there a squaring of the circle going on here? Is there phi relationships going on in here? What is the relationship between the inner circle and the outer circle, or whatever? So you're looking for all of those, and then you start to piece those numbers together and think, okay, so I can now see how this design shape is put together, and I can see the numbers and the ratios that are involved in that. So then how do I interpret that? So during the drawing process, that's really left brain stuff in a way. It's kind of the focusing in on the detail, looking at recreating the exact replica, then looking at for the ratios and relationships in that. And then finally at the end to go back to that, okay, so how do I pull all that together and interpret what I'm seeing in this design, in this shape? So and then marrying that with those first impressions, that first, this formation might make me feel a certain way. Or I remember once there was this great crop circle back in the early days, I think it was in 1994, and it was very near Avebury Stone Circle, and it looked like a real mess. It kind of looked very strange, all these squiggly lines and everything going on there. I think there were 2 circles and then all these squiggly lines, and I think the formation got the nickname the Celtic Barmaid, because it kind of looked like this figure on a unicycle with a head at the top, and then there was this kind of line that came out, which was like this tray of all these exotic drinks on it. So she was nicknamed the Celtic Barmaid. But a lot of people, when they walked into that formation, felt terrible. They felt dizzy and nauseous, and like some people would walk up I had a friend of mine say, I walked up the tractor line and then couldn't walk inside. I felt totally disorientated. And of course, whenever things like that happen, so that's the noticer bell going off there. It's like, that's really interesting. Why is that? And in fact, it was formations like that, and looking then at how other formations made people feel totally at ease or blissed out or whatever, that started me thinking about, what is the mechanism for that? Why might that be happening? Is that connected with exotic things to do with crop circles, or is it to do with the geometry? And actually, I think it's to do with the geometry. So I think, sometimes people walk in a circle and they feel a real resonance with the architecture of the circle itself. And I think this comes down to that fundamental relationship between form and vibration. And of course, we all have our own individual personal vibration that's different to everybody else. And so the way that some crop circles affect some people is very different. It's quite an individual thing. So that kind of then got me sort of doing a deep dive into cymatics and looking at that whole region as well, for why people might be affected as they are by the crop circles, but also by geometry in general. And of course, when you start to then link that to mandalas like you do, Geoff, the fact that you draw a personal mandala, it's personal to you. It says something about you. And it also has that ability to transform you. Then, and again, that absolutely ties into what some people experience with the crop circles. And then also, Scott, your work as well, because architecture itself, so whether we're looking at some of the great cathedrals or the great temples or stone circles, like Stonehenge or whatever, it's the same geometry going on there, and it's the same kind of effect that this has on people. So, and it's where the title temporary temples comes from. So it's from that thinking about that whole idea that the crop circles themselves have this innate ability to change our own resonance somehow, and
it's like the temporary temple in the field resonates with the temple of the body on a microcosm. And you exactly. feel it. You're somehow altered and changed by your noticing of it all.
Yeah. And sometimes, people walk into a crop circle and they will just burst into tears. They're overwhelmed by the feeling that they get. I mean, that is just staggering, isn't it? I think that's amazing. But it's the same when people walk in a beautiful cathedral or a temple. You go in some of the grand mosques, and the geometry there is just out of this world, and you can you can almost see the effect that has on people. And again, another area that I looked at as well was the relationship between ancient sites and crop circles. So because it's exactly the same thing going on. Our ancient ancestors used exactly the same geometric principles as crop circle makers do in present day, or that the medieval cathedral builders used, or that the geometries in mosques or whatever. It's all kind of part and parcel of the same thing. So, for me, crop circles were a gateway into all of those things.
And
gateway,
the location
real
of the
gateway drug.
Yeah, the location of the crop
circles exactly
show you, okay, they're right by Avebury Stone Circle, or they're by Silbury Hill, or they're by West Kennet Longbarrow, or they're by all these Neolithic sites, very ancient.
Yes.
And they're showing, they're relating to it, and sometimes they're the same diameter as Silbury Hill or whatever, and you're like,
Stonehenge,
making a connection with the ancient past.
Yeah, and that connection is geometry. It's the because of course a lot of those ancient sites were placed in very special locations on the landscape. And again, that may have to do with having a geometric relationship to one. I mean, you look at the work of people like Robin Heath, for instance, who does this so brilliantly. And then of course that leads to then thinking about astronomy. And the geometry of the solar system, John Martineau's work. So, it kind of trickles out. It's a tree or a root system, or whatever it is that you want to call it. It all of these things kind of, and then of course it gets you thinking about things like the philosophy of geometry. So, like Scott, with your book, it sort of, it gets you thinking, what does this say about the way our reality works, or is put together, or is devised? It gets you thinking about those really big, huge questions. So, it might have started out with crop circles in the middle of a newspaper, but then it's a real path after that.
And just the intelligence of the crop circle makers is staggering, and I'm just in awe of Doug and Dave, or whoever it is that's making it. It's really quite a learning experience,
Yeah, Karen, and also, thinking about, I was just going to say very quickly that, that geometry is, again, Keith Critchlow called it, the science of the ever true, or the art of the ever true, which of course it is. So we're talking about, a universal language here. So, and again, that, that's important. If you are one of those people that consider crop circles to be something that is not connected with human circle makers, if you are like that, then this also opens up that question of this other intelligence somehow. What are we dealing with here? Because this is a universal, it applies anywhere and everywhere, whenever. So that it also opens up that question too.
I wanted to ask you about this, Karen, because this is where I find it gets most interesting, where you begin to realize that geometry, is this universal language. Scott sometimes refers to it as valid at the furthest reaches of the furthest galaxy. The same principles could be understood and communicated, and I love this idea about it being a universal language. And I think that's why when you go into cathedrals, as you say, or you see the rose windows and the beautiful churches, they kind of are pointing to this ever true archetype, and it's not like the rose window is saying, this is it, this is the final truth, but that it's almost like that. I like the idea of the Platonic ideal, that like there are these kind of like perfected archetypes that exist in a realm slightly beyond our imperfect world, where we can always point towards the ideal, and so what I wanted to ask you about was, when you really get into geometry, like, have you experienced it taking you into deep places, in yourself, where it kind of goes beyond all of the thinking about like, what could this mean, or the fivefold geometry? It's, I find, because this is what happens to me. I kind of go, oh my God, fivefold geometry is in the body. It's made up of our DNA. It's what moves the planets into the solar system. Everything's connected. There's this interconnected principle. Oh my God, wow. And that's a brilliant journey and highly recommended. And I love doing it over and over again, but equally as important, alongside that particular stream, almost running parallel, is this kind of like, maybe it's underneath, I don't know what the analogy I should use is, but it's almost like a deeper place, like beyond the thinking mind, beyond the concepts, and so I ask you that quite directly to see, is that something you've experienced? And maybe you could open it up into, there are so many stories around crop circles that are, point to the supernatural at the very least. They point to anomalous lights in the sky. I've had my own personal biggest life-changing events courtesy of crop circles, and I'm really a huge advocate for their majesty, but really, like, at the highest level, I'm like, I feel like there's an intelligence that's kind of attempting to communicate with us. And people go, oh, Geoff, what are you talking about? You're mad, you hippie, but I'm like, I genuinely believe this, and then I go like, well, what do you mean by that? Well, I think there's literally like codes of information that are available, in the geometry, but also just abiding in the frequency of it changes you somehow, sometimes more actually than having to work it all out. I personally struggle with this, having to work it all outside of myself versus surrendering to something bigger than the little me, and it's this dance that the crop circles have kind of gifted me more than anything else. So explain the answer to that, Karen, in its fullness. Now I'm only joking. But does what do you think? I just ask you to riff on it,
Yeah, yes, absolutely. How can it not? My answer to that is, how can it not change you? When you start to think about those, whether it's those really big questions of what is the ultimate reality of geometry, but also about how it, affects you personally. Does it make my life any more ordered? No. I live in chaos a lot of the time, but what it does open up, I think, is a door inside. Lots of people, take lots of different routes to get there, altered states of consciousness, but I think geometry is capable of that. And I think, when Geoff invites me to do a 3-hour mandala, experience, I'm off.
That was wonderful. Yeah. Sorry, just for our listeners, Karen came to Ireland and joined. We did a weekend workshop in this 300-year-old shell cottage together. People loved it. It was an amazing weekend, And when this pandemic time passes, I'm looking forward to doing that again, Karen. By the way,
it'd be great fun. Yeah.
But sorry, I interrupted you there.
No, that's all right. So and again, Geoff, you use music in that, and and that's really great too, because music is another form of vibration and geometry at work. It's yet another expression of that. So taking all that in together, I mean, and sometimes I dream about geometry, and I've had some pretty strange experiences. I will share with you one very, very quickly.
Yeah,
I once
please.
had a very strange experience with a black cube, and I was laid in bed one night, and this is how it bakes your noodle, all this stuff sometimes. But I was laid in bed. I was laid on my side as I normally do, and all of a sudden, I just saw at the bottom of my bed this black cube, which was probably about yay big. So maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 feet. It was perfect black cube. And I was absolutely astonished. At first it really frightened me, because suddenly there is something that shouldn't be there. But it is. And so, I'm bloody hell, and my heart is racing. And then, of course, I sit up because, something odd is going on. And then the experience ended with this thing rushing at me and feeling like it went right into my body, right into my chest.
Wow.
And I sat there I was shaking. It was really a really intense experience. Now, there are lots of ways to interpret that. Was it a dream? Was I in some kind of hypnagogic, hypnopompic state? There are a lot, or was it really there? I mean, maybe reality is, I think reality is much more malleable than we think it is. But that, to me, that was a profound experience, and it got me thinking about, the whole idea of what does the cube symbolize, and also takes you into the realm of thinking about geometry as an initiation, and it's one thing we don't have in our society very much anymore. You go back and look at, some of our indigenous tribes who still, when you reach adulthood or other, significant stages in your life as a maturing human being, you will undergo these initiations. Some of them are meant to scare you, some of them use pain, but the idea is that it is transformative, and we don't have those in Western society anymore, apart from perhaps when you turn 18 you might go out and get drunk, but we don't have those kinds of experiences anymore. So for me, I kind of look at an experience like that on that kind of level, that I was at a stage where I was ready to integrate this much more than I had been before. So yeah, I think, and of course, when you begin to, again, think about geometry as a universal language, as a philosophy, as part of the fabric of reality, then it's not really so surprising that it might speak to us in some way if we just took the time to listen.
It's a beautiful story, Karen, and about the black cube, and I think it's a beautiful example of how I'm just speaking for myself. I have this desire to know stuff. I want to understand it all. Like, what is that black cube? What actually happened? Were you asleep? Were you not asleep? Was it in the real world? What's going on? And I find it, no matter what way you cut the crop circle thing up, you're going to get to a place with your own personal interaction with it, where you discover that you just can't know with this kind of sort of quite narrow mental apparatus of a human cognition machine. That and so we're invited to surrender. Like, I've spent so many years, we look outside ourselves looking for answers from experts or people, and one of the greatest gifts that the crop circle phenomenon gives you is, if you really, really go deep into it, I can't make guarantees, but I feel quite confident that it's likely you'll get to a place where you go, you know what? I just don't know. And there's something in that surrender that opens you somehow. I don't really understand all this, but this has happened to me over and over again, But I wanted to ask a question. Maybe, Scott, you could come in on this too. I'm thinking, we sometimes say like that, like, reality is like infinite, and it's infinitely vast. And, you know, if we could just peel back the veil, there's like infinities beyond infinities that we could voyage to, that we can't even comprehend right now. We don't know what we don't know. But I think we all sense that there's more to reality than we confront through our senses, right?
Yeah.
Now, Scott and I kind of, and this is open for debate, like, because everything's always up for review, you know, but we sort of used the analogy that like sacred geometry is kind of like a canoe, okay, that gets you to the other side, okay? It allows you sort of travel beyond the veil, you know, expand your consciousness so you can see kind of like wider glimpses of what's available, you know, like, and there's like probably hundreds of thousands of other canoes, you know. There's a whole renaissance now in psychedelic workshops that's happening around the world. There's traditional forms of meditation. There's like the whole range of traditional spiritual systems, you know. All of them have their merits and values and whatever. But so I want to just hold on this analogy of geometry as the canoe, you know, gets you to the other side. And then Scott and I sort of joke about it. Once you get to the other side and you've broken through to the vista of like discovering something way, way bigger than yourself, then let go of the canoe. You know, you don't need to keep on hanging on to the canoe, like burn the boat basically when you get there, you know. But when I speak to you about, like, you know, how geometry is like the fabric of all of reality, you know, like, I wonder, is geometry more than a canoe? You know, like, is geometry more than, when you get there, is there like more geometry to unwrap? Does that make sense? My question.
Yeah.
Like, is geometry more than a canoe? What do you think?
Yes, I think it is. And to me, it's kind of, it's almost like a fractal, in the sense that you can go out and out and out and out and out, and then you go in and in and in, and it you know, there's, you know, just, it goes on forever. You know, there's always something to be discovered. I mean, wouldn't it be really boring if we thought we'd ever get to the point where we knew everything? And that you know, what would be the point of existing at that point?
That's
you know?
it. I've worked it all out. Mysteries of the universe in the bag. You know, anybody need anything, just ask.
Yeah,
that would be.
I mean, and I think you know, there's the gateway or the canoe analogy. You know. But I just, it does change you, because it opens up other dimensions to you. And I don't mean that in a literal geometric, or, well, there's an analogy to be made there, but, you know, it just, and I think also the other thing is, that's very true about all of this, is that like we would say in psychotherapy, that once you've seen something, you cannot unsee it. And I think it works a little bit like that too, you know, that once you've been on that journey and you cannot unsee it once you've seen it. And so, you know, it's with you, it's with you for life.
Whether people believe you or don't believe you, or you can express it or you can't express it, it doesn't matter. You can't unsee it. You can't unsee it.
With the canoe analogy, you take the canoe or vehicle of geometry to get across the river, let's say. Like, you're going across the Nile and you're going over to the Great Pyramid. And when you get there, you get out of the canoe and you look back at it and you see, oh, it's all made of geometry, the canoe itself. And then you look down at your hands and you're like, wait a second, my hands are made of geometry. And you're like, and then you realize the pyramid is this monument to geometry. And then you realize everything is geometry, and geometry is really just the footprints, the trace of where consciousness has moved. And so geometry is definitely part of the operating system of reality, but it's really just the history of consciousness. It's really all consciousness in the end. And so geometry, you say we can get rid of it. Yes, because actually all you need is the absolute. There's only consciousness, and geometry is there as the way that consciousness relates to itself, in a way.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. Absolutely spot on. And also, I think you talk to anybody who spent any sort of time doing this, and I don't know about you, but you can tell. You know, you meet somebody, you know, that there is something about them, you know, that they tend to be the noticers of things. They tend to be those who might think a little bit more deeply about something, or have an incredibly interesting alternative view on something. So it's, I find it just fascinating the way that it does change people, and the way that you when you meet somebody and they have this similar interest to yours, that then you get into conversations that never have an end.
I know what you mean, Karen. It's a lovely part of it. And actually, on that note, I just wanted to say, and this is something I call out in our podcast in general and our courses, and I know we discussed this with our own workshops, Karen, but when you take on this journey with geometry, for some reason, it seems to be quite a solitary one a lot of the time, or one that you do on your own, I got into it like drawing triangles and squares, and I didn't know what I was doing really. It's almost like, I don't know whether I chose it or it chose me or whatever, but I have to be honest, for a good few years, there was a sort of an aloneness, not like a big painful loneliness or anything, but there was a sense of, I definitely don't have many in my peer group that would be into this passion, for example, and I think what I really cherish about the workshops we do, both in SGA and the Explorers, is that you genuinely meet just what you're talking about, Karen, people who they're just on this path for better or for worse, they've chosen to enjoy this journey. And it's so nice to just kind of be able to let all of you just like fly free in the wind and go, oh, this is me, but have you found at times in your life that it was like, there's sort of a solitariness to it, which I don't enjoy all the time. I prefer being in community with people, connect. That's kind of what we're trying to do with the podcast and the workshops and everything, is bring people together,
Yes, and I suppose, to be fair, some of it is a solitary journey. It is when you're drawing or doing your own explorations, it is something that, especially when it's to do with you personally, it is something that you pursue alone. But then, yes, being in community is actually really important, because it's how then you learn from there on, because you, as a person, you have your own perspectives, and yes, geometry opens up new perspectives, but so do other people, because they are all individuals and have individual perspectives as well. So, being able to talk to other people about this on a really deep level is very important. It's actually one of the biggest things I miss about Michael not being around anymore, is, just that being able to pick up that phone and have a where he'd say, oh, I've been working on this sevenfold, and then we'd go off on a whole riff about, the analogies and allegories and, properties of, and we'd be off forever, so, and having a conversation like that is so precious, and we don't have enough of them in our lives, I think, particularly in the in the Western world, we don't connect with people on that level very much. It tends to be either psychological support groups or things like that, but not on a philosophical kind of way. If you go to a therapy support group, it's a very narrow focus, that there's a point to it. You go to learn about yourself. And sometimes you can learn about yourself through being reflected back at yourself through other people. But I think with geometry, it's the questions are much bigger. That yes, they are personal, but they're also bigger than that. They're about what makes us human. What is it to be a human being? What is it to have consciousness? What is consciousness? You would never discuss those kinds of things really in a therapy session, but you do in a geometry session, because those things naturally arise up. It's like, I remember writing an article a while back about an infinity symbol crop circle that had appeared, and then just going into this whole idea of, well, what is infinity? What is eternity? What is forever? And how are those things different? You know, how can I, you know, understand that a little bit more? And, you know, and that was it was a great personal journey. But then, you know, then I got great feedback about it from people who said, oh, I read what you wrote, and here's some of my ideas about that. So I think that's enormously important, you know, that you get feedback from other people about what you do, and you get that, and just getting time to riff off somebody else, you know, and to share some ideas and just see where it goes. It's enormously rewarding.
I love what you're saying as well about it being, you know, it is ultimately, there is an element of it which is personal. You reminded me of like one of my favorite lines from Morpheus from The Matrix, you know, he says, like, I can only show you the door, but you're the one that has to walk through it, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And there's a little bit of that going on. By the way, Matrix 4 is coming out next month. I cannot wait. I'm like super Matrix nerd. I'm going to be wearing a t-shirt when it comes out, you know? But before we go, Karen, there was one other question, or maybe just like I just wanted to honor this. So one of the gifts you've given me about geometry was when I first started connecting with you, and I was telling you about mandalas and drawing the geometry, and there's just something seems to happen like when you draw this geometry, and I can't really explain it, and it's hard to articulate a lot of the time. You sort of said like there's a quality of intimacy, actually, was the word you used. And I'd never heard intimacy used with geometry, you know, but it just, when you said it, I kind of had this aha, because it is really intimate, isn't it?
It is.
When you draw geometry.
Yes.
Well,
no, absolutely it is.
Intimate, and it's also transpersonal. So it's it's both the inside and the outside at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I always feel like with the crop circle that I don't know a crop circle until I've drawn it, you know, because that, you know, it is that intimate act of getting to know something through, you know, and it's kind of a dance sometimes, isn't it? When you draw geometry, it's kind of like sometimes drawings come really easily, and you, oh, yep, and I can see how that works. And then sometimes, you know, I can really struggle with some drawings, and sometimes I have to just put them away and then come back to them. But yes, you do develop an intimacy, and yes, it is transpersonal too, because you know, you are learning something that applies to not only you, yourself, and I, but then also to everybody as well at the same time. So it does have both of those
That's
qualities.
Beautifully put. That's beautifully put.
You know, and numbers, also, geometries, proportions, ratios, they all have qualities too. They have personalities and characteristics. And sometimes I find it useful to think about it in that way as well, to think about them as a personality. How is this personality put together, you know, in that sort of way too.
Karen, you once said that crop circles for you are multivalent, I think was the word you used, which is like, and I had to look it up because it wasn't a word I use very often, but it means like multi-dimensional or multi-layered, multi-leveled. And I think that all crop circles, or most crop circles, have that going on. There's a lot of layers in that. And that in a way is isn't it kind of a mirror of, like, to get at those layers, you need other people, you know, you need the multi-level, you need the multi-voices of all the different people who are drawn to the phenomenon to actually unpack just a single formation.
Yep, and it's like going back to that analogy of, you know, a therapy group. But, you know, part of what makes those work is that people reflect yourself back at you, how somebody from the outside sees you, and then you learn from that, you know. And geometry, it works in a very, very similar way, you know, that you discover things about yourself through the study and drawing of geometry, but then expressing those ideas to somebody else, they can then reflect back to you about, okay, so that then makes me think about this, or that reminds me of that, or actually I approach this way myself, and that is it's so invaluable to learning.
called to share Michael, just when you're speaking about reflecting and people reflecting you back, but Michael made the lovely quote, which I love to, reuse, is that like circles are mirrors within which we can polish our souls. I just really dig that. I think that's a beautiful metaphor for the whole yoga of what we're doing here with the formations, and I wanted to speak to this paradox or irony, Scott, that you mentioned, and Karen too. It's so true about like the more, and this is borrowing a quote from John O'Donoghue, who was one of these Celtic philosophers, which I adore. But the point basically, and I'm paraphrasing it, but it's like the more you journey inward towards the source of your own soul, and you that's the solitary journey, or you're the only one that can walk through the door, the more you journey inward towards the source of your own soul, and you go in, somehow, magically, the more connected you feel to everything outside yourself, and that is a big part of what's going on here, isn't it? It's you wouldn't think it's that, because you think, oh, you're being a recluse, you're going inward, you're kind of like becoming a hermit, but no, it awakens you to the interconnectivity of you with other people, with your surroundings, with your environment. Don't you find that so cool about it?
I do, and it's also a reminder that, for all the privilege that we have as being able to work on geometry, to learn from other people as well, that then we have a responsibility to kind of enable other people. I actually feel that quite seriously, that this has afforded me so much in my life. Now, how do I then enable this for other people who are ready? Because not everybody's ready. This isn't everybody's bag. Not everybody's going to dig this. And there are many transformative phenomena around, that to cater to lots of other
many
people's
canoes.
Yeah, many canoes of different shapes and sizes and all kinds of things. But for, I think when you learn things, that there is a responsibility to share that with other people. How can I enable other people to have this experience for themselves and to learn about all of this?
I think like the honest, earnest student naturally becomes the teacher. If you take your studies seriously enough, it turns you into a teacher.
There's something built into the system. In that regard.
So guys, can you answer me one question? Are you allowed to cuss on this podcast?
Well, there's no limits. It's like this podcast it goes to the
I want to share one
other.
I want to share one other quote with you, which is, that the great Alan Brown, when he was doing his work on the geometry of crop circles, and then also he did John Michel's beautiful book with him, How the World is Made. But my favorite quote of his is that crop circles do your effing head in, and I think there is there's an element of that to all of this too, that to kind of to not to hold all of this very reverently and with respect, but to also hold onto it very lightly, I said how important this was for me, and I mean that quite earnestly, but I hold that quite lightly as well, that it's, to remember to, have a sense of humor and a little bit of levity in what you do never goes amiss.
And there is oftentimes a trickster archetype associated with it as well, like it was just very fun loving, like the Joker. That's very much associated with it too. But just in the spirit of sharing, we are going to have to, bring this wonderful podcast to a close, but it's such a joy speaking to you, Karen. And like with all our guests, we're hoping this is the first conversation of many, so we very much look forward to doing it again. But just in the spirit of sharing, I know at Sacred Geometry Academy, that's essentially what we're doing with Scott. But I also, I'm like honored and feel privileged, Karen, to be, alongside you hosting and presenting our Crop Circle Explorers workshops, so we should both, but I'll give you the stage. We should really shout it out and invite people to what we're doing there, because it's one way of sharing it, but also please take a moment to share with people where they can go to find your work, your website, where they can get these yearbooks, the photos. I mean, it's temporarytemples.co.uk, but I want you to shout it out and, really, direct people to where they might connect with you.
Oh, well, thank you very much for that. I mean, it is also an honor and a privilege to have you alongside me. So, the feeling is very, very mutual. I mean, yes, please visit our website, www.temporarytemples.co.uk. There is, a image library of hundreds and hundreds of pictures of crop circles that you can look at, contemplate, try to draw, play with us, and do whatever you want with this, in whatever creative way, that occurs to you. These images are hugely transformative, no matter where you think they might come from. They are a joy to work with. Infinitely fascinating, all the different kinds of geometry, and some geometries that have never been seen before until they were in a crop circle. So, there's some of that too. And yep, our yearbooks are there, that, they're the flagship of what we do. I'm actually enormously proud of them, that we've been doing them, for so long, and they're amazing.
They're amazing.
We put our heart and souls into them, so please, yes, please do that. And, we do all sorts of other things. You can buy prints of Steve's amazing pictures on there. We do a calendar every year. Calendar's a great way of introducing somebody into all of this, in a nice, non-confrontational way. Yeah, and then the conference, which, of course, with COVID, we've had to do online for a couple of years. Maybe we'll get back to doing it live at some point. We just kind of have to. We're in the hands of the gods with that one at the moment. But then also our Crop Circle Explorer courses, which again are just something really important to me. Again, it's that, how can we get people together talking about this? How can we get other people sharing their perspectives, which I think are equally as valid as mine, and to enable them to sort of give them permission, and also give them some tools to work with as well, and some space to do it. Here's some space, come and have some time just doing this and having some fun, but also to share how we work, so to share how I personally work. Again, all those things that we talked about earlier about, to start off with those first impressions, and then to build on that, to build on to the, so we have an exploration phase, a contemplation phase, and then kind of this resolution phase where we kind of bring it all together and say, okay, so now that we've done all this work with this, because the great thing about explorers is that we work with one crop circle at a time. So, we really give ourselves permission to sort of do these incredible deep dives, but then to come to some resolution at the end of what that crop circle might mean for you, and also what it might mean to the group, for instance, and how might we interpret it? What do we take away from it? So I think that's incredibly important work.
Can I join in a bit of the self-promotion, while we're here, but just on Explorers. So Karen and I do this workshop called Crop Circle Explorers. And just as you're saying, Karen, just to echo what you're saying, we pick one particular formation, and it's based over 4 weeks, where we have these 4 3-hour sessions essentially, and it's an unbelievable way to dive deeply into the majesty of a formation, and like I feel like more of a participant than I do a host or a teacher or whatever. It's like when we do these together, like it's unbelievable what's revealed to you. So I can't recommend it more highly, if that's allowed. Are you allowed to recommend yourself more highly? Is that a bit egotistical?
I think that's
but
okay.
No, I mean, we may as well shout it out, seeing as you're the guest of the day. It would feel only appropriate to do that,
well, thank you.
And we're planning on doing many more, aren't we?
Yep, hopefully. Yep, we'll have some 2022 dates before long on the website. So
amazing. And well, Karen, a huge thank you so much. It's been a real honor, and it's it feels sometimes it's like it's more tricky to interview somebody really well for a podcast. You know what I mean? There's something about like genuinely not knowing somebody that is nearly easier, but it's because there's so many spokes on the wheel we could go to. But I think we touched on the core themes that were really had heart and meaning for us today. It's been a real gift having you on the podcast. We're so grateful. Thank you so much. And until next time, thank you, dear listener, for following us this far through on the podcast. And Scott and I will be back real soon with our next episode. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.